so once you mentioned about this idea and how it was actually born, how did you go about formalizing the concept? Like writing a business plan was probably your first thing. And then of course, doing a market analysis, user research, defining the core components and features. Like how eventually did you build the roadmap, kind of like we see on this next slide?
Well, the key thing that kind of started off, I should say I should go back, and talk about my experience working on other digital health products. There was one example that kind of illustrates a trend that I unfortunately noticed and have seen all too often within the digital health space. And this was a project I worked on where I developed my team and I developed an app to measure concussions in American football players. And it was co-developed with the Cleveland Clinic, and Apple was very much involved in the project, and they even featured our app on their homepage for a month in 2014.
Nice.
A lot of money was put into this app. We're talking probably north of 10 million invested in building out the concept, maybe probably much more than that. Anyways, to make a long story short, the technology worked, the company and the business model completely failed. Even big players like that are not guaranteed success in this market. The main reason is that the researchers and the technologists, I would say, because they were tinkerers that were working for the hospital system, found out that you could do really incredible things with mobile technology. And so they started doing it. But what they forgot to really look at and explore was, how are they going to get paid? How are they going to get reimbursed? And in the US market, as in Germany, you have to accommodate health insurance companies that need to have you present new technologies to them in such a way that they could quantify it, study it, evaluate it, find that it's relevant, and then admit it into a reimbursement program before you can start generating revenue. And that missing piece is explains 95% of some of the healthcare startup failures I've seen, that they never really put the time into it. So that was our focus in 2018, was to define what kind of technologies could we introduce into the healthcare market? How would they be reimbursed, and what would the features and functions of those technologies need to be in order to conform to what these health insurance companies wanted to do? So the research led us from an idea of building technology to monitor geriatric patients to a point that is really what CarePath is today, where we're using a much more refined technology, a combination of IoT, AI in the cloud, an API, a front-end web design, responsive web design, and mobile app, all around healthcare and monitoring symptoms in a patient, so that it became from a care app to a medical app. And that switch came mid-2018, late 2018, before we really said, all right, this new strategy is going to get more traction, and we're going to get more revenue from it. And then as we realized this was the path we needed to go, we could finally start designing some of the requirements around it. And as I think you guys recall, because for the benefit of the audience, I think our first conversations with Lemberg date back to early first quarter 2019, maybe a little bit later than that.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah, but I wrote a document that was maybe in the 70 to 80 page range that outlined, what the business purpose of CarePath was, what were some of the demographic trends, what were the changing regulations and laws and initiatives by the German government, and then defined personas that fit within that environment. So our lead character, Frau Frisch, is what we now use internally to describe, why are we building this app? It's to benefit her and her home and take care of her. And then the requirements of the different elements of our system that needed to be built. And that would include a mobile app, that included, at the time, cloud infrastructure, IoT, other sensors, things like that. And then we presented it to you guys to take a look at. I think that, plus some of the other supplemental information, provided you with a lot of general context and knowledge about what we were trying to achieve. But really, that's where the research ended, and now we got into design to say, all right, we're committed to now building this, so let's get it done. And from mid 2019, that's really where we embarked upon this. And today we finished our first generation product. It's out to patients, and now we are planning the future. So.
Cool, great. Thanks for sharing that story. Yeah, so we'll of course show our audience more as we move along the slides. Yeah, so next, once your roadmap was kind of drafted and you had your first 80 pages, yeah, requirements document there, how did you go about building the team? Like, if you can say a few words, like what was your thought process, option consideration at that particular time? And of course, like selection criteria for which path you would like to take here.
All right. Well, as I mentioned before, I did manage a design development agency, and so I've been in your side of the client vendor relationship. So, having that benefit of being in both sides gave me kind of a better perspective of how to really utilize resources. And what I knew was that I did not want to staff up a large development team under CarePath. I mean, we don't have enough time to go into reasons why, but the general themes are that it takes a long time to recruit, that once you recruit people with certain talents, that they will be able to kind of develop in different areas, but you're pretty much building out a team that's very purpose driven. We had too many different things that we needed to tackle to make that a viable option. So let me illustrate. When we got started and decided that we were going to make a medical product, the very first thing that we needed to do along that path was research medical literature. And we spent a considerable amount of time, probably about 5 months, 6 months, collecting medical literature that supported our first, what we call symptom detection module. And then once we had looked at that, we hired who's now our head of research and development, to start building algorithms to replicate what we read in the medical literature in code. And that was a very much an R&D endeavor, that there was no certainty that there was going to be a successful outcome. And so there was a lot of flexibility that was necessary there. In parallel to while we were doing that, and we did have confidence that this was going to work, but still, we didn't want to necessarily distract him and have him be a developer to do everything. We know, and I know, we needed to have an elastic staff built underneath him, or around him, I should say, that could carry out the infrastructure that we needed to be built. And that would include the cloud infrastructure, architecture for Microsoft Azure Cloud, features and functions in our mobile application, which at the time we thought was very valuable, and then ancillary systems that are on there. That is a very clear business case for using an agency to do that. And that's why we engaged you guys, because you could provide us with a deeper bench. That bench could be elastic so that you could build up smaller teams around the different components that we needed. And as each component got done, you could pass it to a QA department. You could go through the testing, and you could follow our requirements on project management and quality management, and also documentation that were very important for a medical app. And so those were things that you guys brought to the table that really complemented our core team of AI researchers. And so that's kind of how we looked at, scheduling out the project, looking at available resources that you guys provided with us, also the different skill sets along the technology stack, but also too on the team compatibility, that you guys carry a very high level of professionalism, and that complemented our team and kind of the culture that we have at CarePath.